These images you're seeing were published by military analyst Chuck Farrer and confirmed by the Kyiv Independent. They are soldiers from the 425th Assault Regiment of Ukraine, an elite unit they call Skylia. And look at what they're doing in this photo. They're raising the Ukrainian flag again on the City Hall building in Pokrovsk. Seems like something simple, right? But wait. Because what makes this image absolutely insane isn't just their courage. It's what was happening on the other side of that building. There were 170,000 Russian soldiers there. 170,000. And even so, they couldn't stop a single Ukrainian regiment from taking back that strategic building. Let me put this in perspective so you can understand what's really happening here. The numbers are insane. 170,000 soldiers. That's the official number that the Ukrainian President, Zelensky, released in November 2025. Just so you have an idea, that's more people than Russia used when it invaded Crimea back in 2014. That's more soldiers concentrated in one place than we've seen in Europe since World War II. And all of that was thrown into a single mission: to capture Pokrovsk, a city of 50,000 people, before winter arrived. And do you want to know why they were in such a hurry? It's simple. Putin needed to show something, anything. Because, for more than a year, the war seemed to be dragging on without much progress. The gains on the map were tiny. And, politically, he needed a victory before the winter snows covered everything. Pokrovsk was perfect. An important city. A key logistical point. A symbol. If Russia managed to take Pokrovsk, Putin could go on television and tell the Russian people, "Look, it's working. The sacrifice is worth it." So he put everything on this bet. 170,000 men, artillery, supplies, and ordered the attack. Here comes the interesting part. November 5th, 2025. The Russian media was celebrating, publishing photos of Russian flags all over Pokrovsk, saying that the city was under full control. Victory guaranteed. And it was exactly at that moment that the Ukrainian troops of the 425th Regiment decided to spoil the party. They infiltrated the so-called gray zone. Do you know what that is? It's that area in the middle of the battlefield where no one has full control. Everything is dangerous. Everything is contested. They went at night, and right away, they were ambushed, which destroyed their vehicle. But they didn't give up. They fought until they managed to get into the city hall. They cleared the building of the Russians who were there. And they did what you saw in that image. They raised the Ukrainian flag again. Now think with me. Look at the impact this had on all that Russian propaganda. It was almost completely destroyed. All those beautiful photos, all those victory statements, all that sacrifice of tens of thousands of soldiers to get there. Everything was lost due to one regiment's operation.
The moment the assault team entered the city council building, the clearing began. The element of surprise was used. Groups destroyed the enemy who was in the middle of the building. Finally, headquarters heard what everyone had awaited.
Mission accomplished successfully.
Great, you're the best. You're the best. Hide and get in touch.
We advanced and cleared the building. We destroyed the enemy there, and then we raised the Ukrainian flag. Our job was done.
And the question that everyone started asking was obvious. How is this possible? You have 170,000 soldiers in the region, and you can't protect a building? The answer to that question is where the story gets really interesting, because it takes us right to the heart of how war has changed. And there's a term the military uses for this: kill zone. Take a look at how the Ukrainian military analyst Mykola Bielyeskov explains this. In World War I, that space between the trenches, no man's land, was maybe 200 or 300 meters wide. Today, that zone is 15 to 20 kilometers on each side. And do you know what caused this change? It wasn't bigger tanks. It wasn't more powerful artillery. It was drones. Those small, first-person drones, the FPVs, the ones with thermal cameras and explosives. I'll give you a very simple example so you can visualize it. Imagine you're the commander of a Russian tank advancing toward Pokrovsk. Your tank weighs 50 tons and cost millions of dollars. The second you enter that 15-kilometer zone, Ukrainian sensors pick up the heat from your engine. A guy sitting several kilometers away, controlling a drone the size of a shoebox, gets your position. And in a few minutes, that drone dives straight into the weakest spot of your tank. 50 tons of metal turn into scrap. And this doesn't happen once in a while. It happens all the time. It's systematic. So, the Russian generals did what seemed logical. They took the tanks out of the field, took out the armored vehicles, because they were becoming too easy of a target. But then comes the problem. If you take out the armored vehicles, your soldiers still need to advance, right? They still need to reach the Ukrainian positions, and the only way to do that is on foot. Light infantry, soldiers with light weapons, walking in small groups, trying to hide from thermal cameras using aluminum blankets over themselves. Picture the scene. It's 2025, the most technologically advanced battlefield in history, and the Russian soldiers are advancing on foot, hiding under blankets. It's a tactic from 100 years ago being used against future technology. And do you know what the cost of that is? Look, it's brutal. Ukrainian reports show that Russia was losing about 1,000 soldiers per day during that period. Do the math. That's 30,000 casualties per month, including dead and wounded. And here's the number that makes everything even worse. 30,000 per month is exactly the maximum that Russia can secretly recruit every month. In other words, all the new soldiers who arrive are already consumed in the same month. There are no reserves left. There's no plan B. It's literally a meat grinder running at its limit. Western intelligence, including the British, confirms that Russian losses since the beginning of the war have already surpassed 500,000 men, and a good part of these losses happened in offensives like this one in Pokrovsk, where the old Russian strategy of throwing more people at the problem ran up against Ukrainian technology. The Institute for the Study of War was straightforward in describing what is happening. The Russian offensives in Pokrovsk. They have consumed an unsustainable amount of people and equipment. But there's a second story unfolding here. A story we don't see on camera. A war within the Russian army itself. In November 2025, a video appeared on social media. It was published by the ATESH movement, which is a resistance group within Russia itself. And the video showed something shocking. A Russian military truck with that famous Z painted on the door, on fire. And who was filming? A Russian soldier from the 115th Brigade. He himself had set fire to his own military truck. The reason? That truck was going to take his unit to Pokrovsk, to the meat grinder. He chose being accused of sabotage over dying in a suicide attack. The statement from the ATESH movement explains everything. They say that by doing this, the soldiers can delay the deployment of the unit and save their own lives. The soldiers see that the commanders are sending them to certain death. No chance for rest, no chance for evacuation. This is not an isolated case of indiscipline. This is the complete collapse of trust between Russian commanders and their own soldiers. And there's something worse. An investigation by the independent Russian media, Vyorska, found more than 100 Russian commanders accused of torturing and even executing their own soldiers in Ukraine. The reasons? Disobeying orders, refusing to take part in suicide attacks, or simply asking for the money they were promised when they got injured. Russian soldiers even have a name for this. They call it being zeroed out. Russian commanders are treating the troops not as people, but as disposable pieces. Now, try to put yourself in the place of that Russian soldier. You receive an order to go to Pokrovsk. It's a death zone where drones destroy all. You know your chances of survival are minimal. You also know that refusing the order could get you executed by your commander. There's no way out, right? So, some soldiers found a third option: sabotage, burning trucks, delaying everything, doing anything to try to survive. And this is where it all connects. That's why 170,000 Russian soldiers couldn't hold a building in Pokrovsk. It's not just because the Ukrainians have better drones, or because the 425th Regiment is good at what they do. The Russian army is collapsing internally. When your own soldiers no longer believe in the mission and no longer trust their commanders, brute force doesn't solve anything. And here we come to the final act, the Kremlin's response. Because, think with me, you just suffered a huge humiliation. Your propaganda fell apart in real time. Your own soldiers are burning equipment, so they don't have to go to the front line. What do? If you're Putin, you change the whole game. November 5th, 2025. The same day the 425th Regiment raised that flag, the Russian Defense Minister, Andrei Belousov, appears at a Security Council meeting alongside Putin, and he drops a bombshell saying that Russia needs to immediately begin preparations to conduct large-scale nuclear tests. Immediately, large-scale. Of course, the Kremlin tried to sell this as a response to the American Minuteman III missile tests, but geopolitical analysts, including the Center for Strategic and International Studies, made it clear this was a calculated move. A signal sent directly to Washington. It wasn't an emotional reaction to what happened in Pokrovsk. It was a deliberate attempt to change the subject, to move away from failure on the battlefield and turn to the nuclear threat. And the Russian propaganda machine panicked too. They started threatening attacks on the coasts of the United States, France, and the United Kingdom with that Poseidon nuclear torpedo. Do you see the pattern? Failure on the battlefield, with barefoot infantry getting humiliated at City Hall, watching their own soldiers burn trucks, and then they start shouting about nuclear weapons and Poseidon. This is the clearest image of the desperation that Putin has gotten himself into. He can't sell victory to his own people because even the soldiers on the front lines know it's a lie and they're rebelling. So, what really happened in Pokrovsk in November 2025 was much more than a tactical defeat. It was much more than a well-executed operation. It was the moment when two completely different military philosophies clashed, and one of them broke. On one side, you have Putin's old Soviet doctrine: brute force, human waves, throwing more soldiers at the problem until it's solved. On the other side, you have Ukraine's modern warfare. Elite units like the 425th Regiment asymmetric tactics, drone technology, and, most importantly, valuing the lives of soldiers. And, as you can see, in this war, brute force lost. 170,000 soldiers couldn't even defend a building for the propaganda to work. But the most important thing is what this reveals. Putin's social contract with the Russian people and with the army itself is tearing apart on the front lines. Putin promised a strong army and guaranteed victory. But the Russian soldier who is sent to Pokrovsk doesn't see a strong army. He sees a meat grinder. He doesn't see victory. He sees certain death. That soldier chooses to rebel rather than believe the propaganda. He burns his own truck. This action by Attech's soldiers is a bigger blow to Putin's regime than that flag at City Hall, because it shows that the lie doesn't work anymore, that the truth has reached even the lowest ranks of the Russian army, and that Putin is losing this war even to his own soldiers. And you know what? The nuclear threats from Minister Belousov won't change that, because, in the end, even World War I didn't end with a great decisive battle, but with the collapse of entire systems and countries. And this double collapse we saw in Pokrovsk, both symbolic and internal, could be the beginning of the end for Putin's system. Because no system can withstand forever the rebellion of its own soldiers and such a huge humiliation on the battlefield. Now tell me, in your opinion, what do you think is going to happen from now on? Will Russia be able to sustain this situation for much longer? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you found this analysis important, share this video and subscribe to the channel for more content about geopolitics and modern conflicts. Thanks for watching.